It's River to River from IPR News. I'm Ben Kiefer. Wildfires are burning at a historic pace across the U.S. this year. Tens of thousands of fires so far, charring millions of acres from California to Georgia. Maybe you're in part of the state where you've had a whiff of the fires already. A new University of Iowa study published in the journal Science finds those fires are doing something less visible than the flames and smoke themselves. They're quietly erasing a decade of progress on ground-level ozone pollution nationwide, contributing to hundreds of additional premature deaths every year. Nowhere has that story been more visible lately than the upper Midwest. Smoke from wildfires burning to the north of us, the smoke drifting down from Canada, has pushed air quality to record levels. So we're focusing on air quality today. Later in the hour, we'll hear from a University of Iowa study's lead author about why ozone is creeping back up, even in places nowhere near a fire. Also, we'll be joined by a public health expert on what that means for our lungs and our hearts, and also a Linn County advocate on how a proposed natural gas plant fits into Iowa's own air quality picture. That toward the end of the hour. Let's start by hearing from two people who've been living inside this smoke firsthand in recent days. Longtime friends of mine, Jerry and Sue Prothero. They moved to Duluth earlier this year. They also have a cabin up in Ely, near the Boundary Waters on the Canadian-Minnesota border. And this past week, Duluth and Ely both logged the highest wildfire smoke concentrations ever measured in state history, triggering hazardous air alerts across most of the state and pushing tourists off the streets in the middle of Duluth's busy summer season. I spoke with my friends Jerry and Sue yesterday. Jerry and Sue, I wanted to get in touch with you, one, because I missed the heck out of both of you, having you moved to Minnesota there a few months ago. But for journalistically speaking, we wanted to get in touch with you because you live mainly in Duluth. You've moved to Duluth, but you have a cabin in Ely there on the border, further up in Minnesota. And as unluck would have it for the both of you, you've been hit by some smoke experience up there, right? We've had some smoke for the first time this season, this summer, here in northeast Iowa, down to, Iowa City, Cedar Rapids. I think central and western Iowa is pretty much normal, but we've had some hazardous conditions, 1 to maybe 200 in some parts of Iowa this past weekend. So I wanted to start off by asking you to sort of vividly describe what you've experienced in the last few days where you've had it much worse.
Sure. The word I'll use is surreal to explain this experience. We were up at the cabin for a couple of weeks, and our visit ended last week. And the last, I would say, 3 days of that visit, a couple things happened. One is it was blazing hot, and we hadn't had any rain. Or we had 1 day of rain while we were there, but otherwise no rain at all. It got inside the cabin. It was pegged at 90 degrees when we would go to bed at night. And usually the beauty of the cabin is I can wear some flannel because it gets cool at night, but that didn't happen. And then one of the second nights of that heat wave, both Sue and I in the morning related that we could smell the smoke come in from those fires. It like woke you up. So it was so thick. And the next morning I go out and there's ash on my car and falling on my car like a snow shower, super light, fluffy. I could blow on it and it would poof.
I want to back up and say that we were blessed in that, one, our cabin is still standing, although the fire close to it is 0% contained. And the other thing is that we were not in an evacuation zone.
Right.
So
Right.
those people for those people, it's worse.
Wow, that's harrowing. And
Mhm.
so, what were your thoughts and your worries at that time in this surreal experience of having ash rain down? And I mean, you had to think first and foremost about your health, right? I would think.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It we were coughing and our eyes were watering. It was nasty.
Yeah, yeah. We're in good health, but it definitely takes a toll. You can feel your body isn't reacting the same way it would with fresh air.
Let's finish this up. And I wanted to just, since you have experienced much worse than anything we've had here in Iowa, and Iowans are tuned in primarily listening to this, if there's one thing you wanted someone here to know, where the smoke hasn't been that extreme yet, to understand about what you've just lived through, what would it be? And is there any way to prepare or think about what, we've got a long ways until this summer and the fire season is over.
Yeah, I've thought about this some, Ben. I hadn't thought about it in that way, but the I think this is with us. This is not new, right? We've had smoke in the past 2, 3, 4 years, and yet you think back to your childhood. I don't think this ever happened, right? So I think what I would say is get ready for this to be, I don't want to say the norm, but more the norm.
Jerry and Sue, you take care, and thanks for sharing this with us. We hope better times for all of us in terms of air quality. Bye now.
All right.
Thanks, Ben.
Great talking to you.
Recorded yesterday with my friends Sue and Jerry Prothero, now living in Duluth and experiencing what you just heard. We're back live now on River to River from IPR News. I'm Ben Kiefer. Joining me now, Jun Wang, professor and Lichtenberger Family Chair in Chemical and Biochemical Engineering at the University of Iowa, Associate Director of the Iowa Technology Institute, and he's the corresponding author of a new study that looks at wildfires and ozone pollution. If you just joined us, we're talking this hour about how wildfire smoke is reversing a decade of air quality progress, what that means for us in Iowa and the Midwest. Jun Wang, welcome to our studio.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So we just heard about the experiences farther north, people suffering through that. They just described something that sounds like a local Minnesota story, smoke and ash right outside their door. This connects with your research. How? Because you are looking at something different, ozone pollution, which is invisible. Tell us how that is distinguished.
Yeah, the ozone is formulated under the sunlight and through a chain of chemical reactions, but mostly is what we call the volatile organic gases, together with the NOx in the air, and then will make up with the ozone at the surface. So when the fire emits the air pollution, they emit not only just smoke particles that affect their visibility, but also emit a large amount of what we call the carbon monoxide. And those carbon monoxide are actually very toxic in itself. But once in the air, they can be carried by the air and transported for hundreds and thousands of miles. In addition, this carbon monoxide also have a very special property that it does not dissolve into water. Even if you have a rain come, that carbon monoxide we call the CO still remains in the atmosphere. So once they transport to the south from the northern Canada fire emission sources, they are going to touch down to the surface, and they are going to mix with what we call the NOx that emitted from the cars, from power plants, and they are going to mix together under the sunlight, and there will be chemical reactions going on that increase the ozone concentration. And this actually, the ozone itself is invisible, but it's actually one of the 7 primary pollutants that are regulated by the Environmental Protection Agency. So it's a very toxic gas. It's one of the primary pollutants, and we just don't see them, but from our naked eye. But there are other ways we can monitor them.
Okay, so the wildfires creating the conditions for this sort of chemical experiment that is creating ozone here. Does ozone tend to hug the ground, or does it ascend? Is it lighter than the rest of our air? Or because we worry most about having, ozone in our breathing space, right?
Right. So that's a very good question. So the ozone in the atmosphere has something we call the good ozone and bad ozone. For most of our kids, probably they learn about the good ozone. That is way up in the atmosphere, probably around 10 miles above the surface. There is an ozone layer that they absorb the UV radiation from
the sun. And that's good for us.
That's good for us.
Yeah.
And however, when they down to the surface, near the surface, this ozone is actually bad ozone. They can irritate the airways of our human lungs and cause inflammation in the lungs as well. So and it's also cause damage on the crops as well. So it's actually bad ozone, and and we need to monitor them. Currently in the EPA, in collaboration with state and federal agencies, there are a network of about 1,300 ground monitor sites to monitor ozone. However, the United States is a very large country. Especially in the Midwest, we have very large territorial rural areas, which we don't have the surface monitoring sites. Give you a number, in the Iowa as a whole, we have about 12 ground sites to monitor the ozone.
So we aren't monitoring it as much as we need to.
Right.
Jun, we have to take a short break, and we'll be back to talk more about your research. We'll really dig into your research. Jun Wang is a chemical and biochemical engineer at the University of Iowa, and his new study talks about how we're taking steps backward after years of making progress on ozone improvement. We'll talk more with Jun Wang in just a moment, and you can join our conversation with your questions about ozone, wildfires. What are your concerns about air quality as we experience that this summer? 1-866-780-9100, River to River at iowapublicradio.org. I'm Ben Kiefer, back in just a moment. So glad you're with us on this edition of River to River from IPR News. I'm Ben Kiefer. This hour, how wildfire smoke is reversing a decade of air quality progress, what it means for us here in Iowa and in the Midwest as well. Currently with me, Jun Wang. He's a chemical and biochemical engineer at the University of Iowa, corresponding author of a new study on wildfires and ozone. And as he was describing to us before the break, ozone is a secondary pollutant. It's not something we can see or smell. It's not emitted directly, but formed when nitrogen oxides and other compounds react in sunlight, as Jun described. And unlike smoke, it's invisible. And researchers say that's part of the reason, I think, it's gone without being monitored and tracked. So, Jun, let's dig into your study. You found that decades of ozone improvement, and I'm remembering decades ago when we were worried about ozone and making sure we had enough of that in the atmosphere to protect us, and we had to reformulate aerosol cans, right, and not have the chlorofluorocarbons there. That was all part of that drive. So now we have ozone back in our news for another reason, being created in another way. We had decades of ozone improvement, largely driven by cleaner cars. That starts reversing around 2013, I understand. What changed?
The primary change is actually the increase of fire emissions over the western U.S. as well as in Canada. What we find is that by using satellite data together with many best model outputs, we are able to find out that since 2013, the surface ozone pollutants has been increasing. And that's a big contrast compared to the first decade of the 21st century, where we see the declining of surface ozone concentration across the whole country. Thanks to other regulatory work put together, we have more cleaner cars, we have less emissions from the fire power plants. So air getting cleaner and cleaner. However, the regulation cannot be put in place for fires. These are natural disasters caused by lightning and so on and so forth. And on top of it is also the air getting drier, and the nighttime also have more higher temperatures. So we see more increase of fires as a result of that. And through the long-range transport, the emissions from fires can be carried over by air in long distance. And that's what we see the ozone increase over the U.S. in the past 10 years, especially with the Midwest.
Yeah, you talked about a lack of monitors where we need it. So how did you, in this study, actually detect a trend that the country's ground monitors, what they were not picking up? How did you detect it if we are lacking in monitors?
Right, that's a very good question. So we basically put all the pieces together, try to tackle this puzzle. As I mentioned, we have surface monitors. Those are ground truths. They are very accurate, but they lack special coverage. Like in Iowa, we only have 12 stations. So, but on the other hand, we have satellite data that can cover the globe, if you wish to cover it every day, and tell us the column amount of ozone from the surface all the way to the up part of the atmosphere, total amount of it. Then we also have models that can tell us how the air moves, how the weather pattern changes. So we put all those pieces together in a framework of the artificial intelligence, and we are able to independently calibrate this model and verify the outputs. As a result, we generate a ozone data sets that in every half miles across the U.S. since 23, everywhere in the continental U.S. So from there, we can study the trend of ozone, even in the neighborhood where we don't have surface monitors.
Mm-hmm. Iowa is nowhere near a major fire right now, June. Explain to us how the Midwest shows up so clearly in your data when we are hundreds, if not more, miles away from the fires, up where Jerry and Sue were, up there on the Canadian border.
Right. You are absolutely right. We in Midwest, we don't have the source of fires. However, we do have the air that are coming from Canada, from the west. And what it works is that the most time in the middle of atmosphere, probably 3 or 4 or 5,000 feet above the surface, the air generally moves from the west to east. But on the other hand, you also have the waves. That means the air can come to the south, can come to the north. So as it's oscillate, if the wind is coming from the north, it will carry the fire emissions to our region, and that's where we are what we call the receptor of those air pollutants from Canada, and so the air does move, and one place affects another through that air movement.
Okay. If you just joined us, how wildfire smoke is reversing a decade of air quality progress, cutting down on improving in ozone, for instance, what that means for Iowa. Join us, 1-866-780-9100, river to river at iowapublicradio.org is our email. It's a crucial point now. To have us talk about the health implications here. Joining us in the studio, me and Jun are with Peter Thorne, a professor and distinguished chair at the University of Iowa College of Public Health. Peter is a toxicologist. Welcome back to our program, Peter.
Hi, Ben.
Familiar face, familiar voice on our program. So Jun just described the problem and his very important research there. So you're here to help that translate into your sphere of public health. What are the implications? Well, we have the gap in data, but we also have the implications for our health, not only from the smoke particulates, but now ozone. Tell us your thoughts here.
So I think Jun's paper, which is a beautiful bit of work, fills in the gaps on the exposure to ground level ozone, as he said. There's been similar research done with fine particulate matter, what we call PM 2.5, which is also regulated as a criteria air pollutant under the Clean Air Act. And PM 2.5, there was a nice study from Stanford a couple of years ago that was somewhat similar in that it found that wildfires are erasing the gains that we've seen in public health improvements due to lower exposure to PM 2.5, also due to wildfires. So wildfires are causing an increase in ground level ozone. They're causing an increase in fine particulate matter. That's the kind of thing that Jerry and Sue were talking about, seeing both fine and coarse particulate matter. And it's also contributing to nitrogen oxides, all of which are dangerous to health. And what they do, they induce oxidative stress and inflammation, and through a number of pathways that have been studied quite well. And large studies, particularly studies in children, have found that a very small increase in exposure to nitrogen dioxide in the first 3 years of life increases the chances of being asthmatic at age 4 by 25%. And similarly with fine particulate matter, an increase of about 3.4 micrograms per cubic meter, which is about 1/3 the standard. Mm-hmm. That small increase is enough to cause a 31% elevation in rates of asthma at age 4. So when we think about these air pollutants, we pay attention to people who are elderly and maybe have underlying heart or respiratory conditions. We think about asthmatics or people with compromised lung function because they have COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or people who have to work outside in these conditions and are exerting themselves. Those are the at-risk populations that we worry about the most. And with increasing wildfires, this is another piece of the puzzle that is contributing to ill health.
Mm-hmm. So those people need to pay attention particularly to what the rating is. I think when I looked this morning, something like 50 in this part of Iowa. Yeah. I think we're below 100 in most parts of Iowa today. I don't know if you checked recently, Peter.
Yes. So you're referring to the Air Quality Index.
Air Quality Index, which is a mix of what?
Air Quality Index is a formula that the EPA has created that combines the adverse effects of these pollutants, but is primarily contributed to by PM 2.5 and ozone as the most dangerous for health. Mm-hmm. And so when we have this in the red or the magenta, those are very dangerous levels for people who have susceptibility, but even regular folks shouldn't be going out to exercise in those conditions.
So when I think I saw on the weekend readings where I was here in eastern Iowa of 160, something like that,
right.
People out biking and jogging, that's not good.
Probably not a good idea to do that.
You're doing more harm than good.
We biked on Saturday when the air quality was good. When it got up to 159 on Sunday, we stayed in and did chores inside the house. And so it's good for the public to pay attention to these AQIs that are now widely reported on weather apps. And you can go to airnow.gov or download the app for EPA's AirNow and track it. And do pay attention to it because it does matter.
Our listener, Dirk, is very interested in finding, he wanted to know what I think you just answered, limiting time outside, physical exertion. Also, Dirk wants to know, should we be using masks on heavy smoke days? Does that do anything for ozone or just for the particulate matter?
Well, your typical N95 is designed for particulate matter, and it will do a good job of reducing your exposure to particulate matter, less so for ozone. And so, again, on these days when the AQI is high, if you can stay indoors and keep the house tight if you have air conditioning, and there's ways to provide HEPA filtration and do other things to keep the indoor air clear. And
so that filter I have in my furnace that I change every few months, depending on how fine it is of a filter, it does some good.
It does. It definitely does some good. And there's different ratings of filters. We talk about MERV 11, MERV, MERV 13. The higher that number, the better it is in terms of filtration. And so having a high, springing the extra money if you can afford it for a higher quality filter for your furnace is a good idea. But typically, you want to turn your thermostat so that your fan is running continuously, so you get the continued filtration.
Oh, I see. Okay, very good. That's
most
important.
thermostats have that separate choice of keeping the fan running, fan on.
Keep your house fan going, circulating that air,
correct.
Running it through those high MERV filters.
Yes, and if you have a HEPA filter unit that's designed for cleaning a room, those are helpful too. And there's some DIY box fan versions of that with a MERV 13. You can go to the EPA website and they show you how to make one. Just DIY air filter for home, and you'll find it.
Toxicologist Peter Thorne of the University of Iowa here giving us some tips on how to stay as healthy as possible during these times of wildfires. And Jun Wang, back to you. I understand your work touches on agriculture as well. Rising ozone has implications for not only the people of Iowa, but our crops, our farmland. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, they actually affects the crop health. So that's also one of the reasons that the EPA regulates the ozone concentration. They have studying to show, for example, in polluted places like India and China, in the first decade in the 21st century, those pollutants actually have lead to the loss of the crop yields in those places. So to a degree, those fire emissions through the long-range transport affect agricultural production on the Midwest. It still remains to be seen. One thing I do want
we know that corn and bean plants don't like it.
Right, definitely. We know for sure that those our agriculture crops is very vulnerable to those pollutants.
Yeah, so wildlife, there is no wildlife or plant or animal aside from humans that this is good for. This is bad all the way around.
Definitely true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Peter, anything to add to that?
Definitely true.
Okay. We don't have to put any qualifiers on that. Let's talk a little bit about, where we would go from here and what would it take to meaningfully bend this curve back down. We saw these years of progress. I have to imagine better fire management, emission cuts from cars. Seems like we may be going the wrong direction in terms of policy there in this country.
Data centers, new power needs, and we'll talk about that shortly.
No, go ahead and dive into all of the areas, Peter, that we're talking about.
So a couple things. The fires in Canada are burning in boreal forests that traditionally have been bogs. And because of the changing climate, they're drying up, and because of lower moisture content, they become prone to these fires. So that's attributable to the changes in the climate that we have seen over the last 50 years, and most especially in the last 25 or 30 years. So at a time when we recognize we're going to have more wildfires, we need to be thinking about reducing air pollutants in every other way that we can control. Mm-hmm. And that is transportation, industry, energy generation systems. All of these we should be thinking about renewables and non-polluting sources so that we can offset the increases that we're going to see.
And doing it quickly, doing more than thinking, acting, right?
Correct.
And Jun, jump in here. You want it again.
Yeah, I just want to say that first of all, we need to increase the public awareness.
Yeah.
The air quality is not something people talked a lot, but as we, as a study have been shown, and it's actually true, is that average adult needed about a breeze of 10 to 20 times per minute. If you convert that amount of air into the mass, we need about 30 to 40 pounds of air per day.
I need 30. I don't think of air as weighing anything, but in terms of mass, 30 to 40 pounds of air per day. My lungs, your lungs, most people's.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. So we need to be aware that we should not take for granted that every minute when you breathe the air, this quality of air really doesn't matter to our health, because any pollutant effect will accumulate through our lifetime and will affect our health. So I think that part need to be aware of the public awareness. Another part is that, as Peter mentioned, because of global change, the fire emissions are going up, but we cannot regulate them. However, we need to invest in science and technology. We can monitor them from space. We can predict them into the level at the neighborhood scale so that we can better advise the public when and where those pollutants may affect you, especially if you have kids or elders at home.
Yeah. So Peter, when we go back to Jerry's final comment there about this is with us, and he didn't remember it from his childhood. I don't remember it from my childhood. We didn't have these wildfires unless you lived in a certain place prone to wildfires, I imagine. This is part of the future. And when he says something like, okay, the smoke forecast will be mixed in with the weather forecast, that's baked in.
That's happening now. Yeah. And
it's not going away.
We used to talk about a fire season. Now it's just year-round in many places. We can have fires anytime. And some of the fires that are burning in Canada have been smoldering since last year. They didn't go out in the wintertime.
Oh, we want those bogs back.
Yes.
I don't think we're going to get them. Peter Thorne, hang with us, please. Jun Wang, thank you for coming in and sharing your research with us. Take care.
It's a great pleasure. Thank you.
We'll be back with more conversation about smoke, reversing a decade of air quality progress, and what we can do with it, do for it, in just a moment. Back with more River to River from IPR News. I'm Ben Kiefer, talking this hour about how wildfire smoke has reversed a decade of air quality progress nationwide, how that's showing up right here in Midwest in an invisible, odorless form, ozone. We talked about that interesting but also dangerous chemical process that is being encouraged by the wildfires. My guest still with us, Peter Thorne, toxicologist, professor, distinguished chair at the University of Iowa College of Public Health. Peter, when we were talking before the break, you talked about who's most vulnerable to rising ozone and wildfire smoke and what we can do with it. And we want to talk about zeroing on Linn County in just a moment. But, let's do that right now, because there's a live policy question happening in Linn County that I know you're following that ties into this directly. And before the break, you were talking about, okay, these natural catastrophes, the bogs have dried up or are drying up in Canada. We're getting more wildfires. That's not going to end anytime soon. So we have to reduce the other pollutants as much in the air, what we have control of.
Right. We
have to reduce. And there's something going on in Linn County with a proposed natural gas plant that speaks directly to that. Give us an overview of what's happening.
Sure. So we have to go all in on all solutions to reduce air pollutants. And so while we're trying to look at better ways to predict the fires, maybe minimize those, they're going to be with us a long time, as you said. So other things we need to be thinking about are how do we decarbonize transportation, which means convert from gasoline-powered engines to e-vehicles and other types of transportation. We need to decarbonize industry by transforming our industry to be much more efficient in terms of the use of energy. And then our electricity generation, we need to be choosing the cleanest alternatives. Iowa is blessed with beautiful wind, wonderful solar that we can combine with advanced storage to yield clean energy that is non-polluting and that isn't going to contribute to greenhouse gases, as well as to the ozone and the PM 2.5 that causes adverse health effects. So we need to be thinking all across the board of how we can electrify and do that in a way that is free of fossil fuels. What's happening right now in Iowa and elsewhere in the country is we're seeing a huge increase in energy capacity needs, electricity capacity needs to power data centers. And they're building up so fast that we're really not, I think, using the best thinking in terms of how we power these data centers. Mm-hmm. In my opinion, we need to really be focused on renewable energy solutions, not polluting solutions like gas turbines, for instance. And so in Linn County right now, there's 21 projects that are proposed or in progress for data centers. And we have to think, how are we going to power these? At least one of the large projects is slated to use nuclear power from the once retired Duane Arnold nuclear facility that's being brought back online. That's non-polluting. That's a good solution. There are others that are proposing to use simple cycle gas turbine, and that takes us backward. And I think that's not a good idea.
It takes us bad because when you talk about decarbonizing, it goes in the opposite direction.
Right. So gas turbines produce nitrogen oxides. We talked about nitrogen dioxide, one of the precursors of ozone. So that's bad because it produces ground level ozone that has adverse health effects. It also produces some particulate matter, and it also produces a whole lot of carbon dioxide, which is a greenhouse gas and further fuels this global climate change that we're seeing. If instead of putting in simple cycle gas turbines, we put in wind plus solar plus advanced energy storage, we would avoid all of those adverse consequences.
Toxicologist Peter Thorne of the University of Iowa. Let's invite our final guest to add into this conversation today. Abe Kellison is with Save Morgan Valley, a group opposing this proposed natural gas plant in Linn County. Abe, welcome to our studio.
Thank you for having me. It's nice to meet you.
Yeah, okay, we've got your mic on there. Abe, Peter set that up here, so be a little more focused, more specific. What is the Morgan Valley Energy Center that is being proposed? What stage is it at, and why are you involved?
So the Morgan Valley Energy Center is a 720 megawatt gas-fired power plant that's being proposed off of Highway 30 in Linn County, right off the Linn County Benton Road. And it's being proposed vaguely to provide energy for future development. It's been said not for one specific project, but just for future development. But we've also been told that it's actually there to power data centers. We haven't shown a need for this energy by any of the residents, and they were not informed of this plant. So naturally, when they had, there's an informative meeting that they had, Alliant Energy had in March, that we all attended to find out more information to see, kind of the background, what was going on. Mm-hmm. We did, and we had a lot of questions, naturally, just about where it was going to go, how big it was going to be, who needed the energy, what's it going to cost, the environmental impacts, specifically air. And we didn't get a lot of answers. So we formed Save Morgan Valley to oppose the plant because we wanted transparency. We wanted to get answers on those specific questions that we were asking. And so that's what we've been doing for the last 3 to 4 months, mm-hmm. is trying to ask questions and find out answers.
Mm-hmm. Peter, back to you. Linn County, I understand, already carries a failing grade for air quality mm-hmm. From the American Lung Association. Do we know what adding a plant of this size actually does to that picture?
Yeah, so that failing grade that has been received is kind of a nuanced thing. That includes air quality excursions that were associated with the wildfires we had a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. So the air quality in Linn County has been quite a bit better than that would suggest. That I think that it's safe to say that was anomalous. Mm-hmm. However, we do want to maintain the best air quality we can. And as we're starting to put data centers up, we have to be mindful of how we're producing that electricity. The other thing I would say is even without data centers, all this other modernization that I talked about of transportation, of industry, of homes, electrifying our homes, that's going to take almost as much new electricity as data centers are. And so we need to be building this capacity both for the electrification as well as if you believe we need data centers for data centers as well. Most of us use data quite a lot these days.
I understand this is a Title V facility. Mm-hmm. Back to you, perhaps. That's a designation of the Clean Air Act.
Correct.
What does that mean in plain terms? How much pollution are we talking about?
It basically means that it's a heavy polluter. We actually have numbers from the permit application that Alliant filed last week for this plant, so I can give those to you really quick. What this means is 319 tons of nitrogen oxide, this is annually, 1.5 million tons of CO2 equivalent, 61 tons of PM2.5 and 105 tons of other volatile organic compounds emitted annually. So my question is, even though, you can question whether or not the American Lung Association's grade of an F it requires nuance, the question should be, why would we want to build something in this location that would not improve air quality, but would actually make it worse?
Well, I'm just going to say because we don't feel we have any alternatives. But you're saying, Peter, we do have alternatives.
We do, yes. And actually, when I ran the numbers, I got larger numbers than those that Abe just said. And I think that's because I presumed that this thing would run like 80% of the time, contributing to load. And I think the submission from Alliant presumed a much lower capacity that they would contribute to the grid. So is it going to be running 20% of the time? Is it going to be running 80% of the time? That makes a big difference. And there's not a lot of clarity as to really how much power is going to be taken from this 720 megawatt capacity facility. But to your point, why not build wind turbines and a solar farm with advanced storage? We can do that. We have the technology. And if you use a life cycle analysis, that is by far the cheapest way to do it. It would save ratepayers money. It would save the AI businesses money. And and that's without even considering the costs associated with adverse health effects of mortality and morbidity.
Okay, so just to make sure we're clear on this, Peter, if a project like this, which meets all the legal emission standards on paper, and I'm not hearing anything different or that it doesn't, is there any way for regulators or the public to stop it? Because it's fully within the legal realm of setting up a new power plant.
Yeah, I mean, there's different levels of that. The EPA and the Iowa Department of Natural Resources and Linn County Public Health have to evaluate it and see if it is if the application complies with the law. And it gets into the weeds a little bit here, but some have argued that they're required to use best available control technology, BACT, we call that. And some would argue that a simple cycle gas turbine is not BACT at this point in time, that they should be at least using combined cycle, which is
single cycle is dirtier than combined.
40% less efficient.
Okay.
So basically in like 10 seconds, simple cycle is you just run the gas through, you burn it, it spins a turbine. Combined cycle, you take that extra heat, you make steam, and you run it through a steam turbine. So you have two turbines, and you get double, not quite, but almost double the energy out of it. So you need to run less natural gas through there to generate the same amount of power, so it's much more efficient and produces 40% less air pollution. Okay.
So, Abe, give us an update on where Save Morgan Valley is right now. What are your chief challenges? What is the timeline you're looking at for this proposed gas plant?
Our timeline is yesterday. We need to get as much information as we possibly can. Real quick, I just wanted to clarify something. When I talked about those emissions, that was based on an application that's only 80% complete. So those numbers can change significantly going forward. But back to your question, we're trying to get out and speak to the public as much as possible with town halls. We were at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting last night where we were talking about deadlines, and so we're talking about mid-August for some applications and in September for other applications. And so we're trying to get as much awareness out there as we possibly can in order to kind of inform the public as to what's going on, because a lot of people don't understand and don't know that this is being built or why and how it will affect us.
Where do people go to find out more specifically about that project?
For what we're doing at Save Morgan Valley, you can go to savemorganvalley.com. We've got a site that has a lot of information about upcoming events, and it's got a lot of technical data. We have used a lot of information from Dr. Thorne's presentation that he gave at the Board of Health meeting a few weeks ago. We've also got a Facebook presence, Save Morgan Valley on Facebook, and so they can get a lot of information on that.
Okay. We have about 4 or 5 minutes left. Let's tie up some loose ends. Peter, you have something on your mind, I see.
Yeah. When we're talking about public health issues, and we're focused here today on air pollution.
Yeah.
But one of the other concerns that comes up with data centers is the amount of water that is consumed. And so, I think folks have heard a lot about that, and there's different types that some just run the water straight through to cool it. Others are using cooling systems. Another issue is noise. The gas turbine plants that power these and the backup diesel generators that they have contribute to noise. And nighttime noise interferes with sleep, and that has definite adverse health effects associated with it. So that's another consideration. And then there's things like lights and traffic and other considerations that. So I think when permitting is being discussed, all these issues have to come forward: air quality, water use, water quality, noise pollution, light pollution, and traffic.
Yeah. Peter, you've dedicated a lifetime, a long career to improving the environment in which we live, air quality and other types of living conditions. You've just made a list there that can be pretty depressing when you think about it, especially when we think about recent years and public policy and so forth. I'm wondering, for you as a public health scientist, how do you keep smiling?
Well, what's depressing to some people is an opportunity in my eyes. We have the opportunity to take a different path, and that different path is towards renewables. And if data centers and the controversy over them helps people, regular folks, have a deeper understanding of what's at stake, maybe it will help propel us towards a renewable energy future that we all need.
Mm-hmm. Abe, you wanted to have a final word here.
Well, I was just going to say, at one of our town hall meetings last week, something that really resonated with me. I had a person come up and talk to me afterwards, and she said, I just feel hopeless. I feel like there's nothing that can be done, that these companies are going to come in and they're going to do what they want. And I said, and after you all presented tonight, I was left with hope. I was left with a feeling that we do have a voice still. We still can be heard. We still can speak out for our air quality and do what's right in order to have people look at this.
And, I think if we do the right thing, we can move forward. This isn't wanting to put a stop on technology or put a stop on industry or ruin people's lives by making them walk everywhere, right?
I have to believe you use AI, Peter.
Not very much, surprisingly.
Okay, good. But anyway, as an aside there. But technology can march forward, but in a more intelligent way is what you're saying.
Exactly. And it can create opportunities for new jobs, for emerging technologies that we can sell to the world if we position ourselves to do it. And so it's not about going backwards in time. It's about just choosing the right path as we move forward.
Okay, and we've got to go. Abe, have you got a quick word there?
Just going to say that I echo that we're not against progress or energy. We just want to do it responsibly.
Okay, Abe Kellison, representative of Save Morgan Valley. Peter Thorne, a toxicologist at the University of Iowa, professor and distinguished chair in the University of Iowa College of Public Health. Peter and Abe, thanks for enlightening us on this very important issue.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you so much. It's my absolute pleasure.
Well, tomorrow it's a Politics Wednesday edition of our program. We'll have Karen Kudrowski and Kelly Shaw, political scientists from Iowa State University. Hope you'll join us. Today's show produced by Nev Kelly with technical support from Danny Gear. I'm Ben Kiefer. Thanks for joining us.